Hi everyone. I so today is the 10th tutorial of I Think Biology, which is an NPTEL course offered by the professors of Azim Premji University. I am Geetika Agarwal. I'm a PhD scholar from the Center for Ecological Sciences, IIC Bangalore, and I will be taking this tutorial today. So I hope you enjoy this video, and we're mostly going to be covering what happened during the 10th week of this course. I will summarize the contents of the lectures, and then I will give you certain question answers so that you can understand and get an idea of what type of questions might come in your exam. Okay, so this week mostly discussed public health and public health in India. What is public health? What comprises of public health? What are the challenges faced by public health in India? What are some biases that come with public health? And there were two case studies. One dealt with rotavirus, and the other was about malaria. So, starting off with public health. So, public health, as you might be aware, is is talks about focusing on protecting and improving the health of populations worldwide. So it is not the healthcare that deals with individuals, but it's the field of healthcare. It's an interdisciplinary field, and in this you're dealing with entire populations. So you're dealing with so it's a population scale field. In this, you're mostly focused on protecting and improving the health of populations worldwide. And according to the World Health Organization, public health refers to all organized measures, whether public or private, to prevent disease, to promote health, and to prolong the life among the populations as a whole. So you're talking about a population as a whole, and it's not individual based, right? And basically, it refers to all of the measures that prevent disease, and they promote health, and they prolong life. And according to the Encyclopedia of Health Economics, public health is about population health. It is a collective social effort in order to promote health and to prevent disease, as said by WHO also. So you're trying to promote health and you're trying to prevent diseases, both communicable diseases and non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable diseases, if you are not already aware, they mostly comprise of things like diabetes or cardiovascular diseases or uh, you know cancer and such diseases are mostly what fall under non-communicable diseases. And you also deal with disabilities that involves people and you involve you undertake surveillance of the population. You carry out family surveys. There is regulation of determinants of health. So you regulate things that can actually affect health, for example food supply, for example air quality and the water quality and the sanitation in the area. And you mostly try and provide key health services with an emphasis on the prevention of cause of disease, and then looking at treatment as well. So our the basic idea, or the very first idea, is to prevent any kind of a disease from happening in the first place, and then moving on to treating if there are some diseases that have happened. So yeah, this is a basic definition of public health. And public health deals with many different aspects, and some of these aspects include we talk about promoting health. We've already discussed this. So we're trying to promote health among the populations, among the individuals of the populations. You carry out surveys of the populations to see what is the disease index and what is the health, how are people faring in that particular area. And then you monitor the areas to look at if there is any particular disease spread, or if how are things happening in the populations that come into your area. And then you analyze how populations have been faring. Are they doing better or worse than before? And then if there are any outbreaks, then you try and handle those outbreaks and see what can be done in order to prevent the spreading of disease and becoming an epidemic. And then you try and prevent diseases as well. And you try and communicate. Either this could be about the communication of the disease spreads, you're trying to prevent the disease spread. Also, you try and communicate and educate the population or the people living in the area about diseases. And you try and be prepared for emergencies. For example, what happened with COVID-19? Suddenly the entire world was taken over by this virus, SARS-CoV-2, to, and we had to deal with it on an emergency basis. So it depends on the public health and the officials involved in public health to be prepared for such scenarios, for such emergencies. And then there is recovery. How are the people recovering from if a disease has happened or if an outbreak has happened? Also, environmental health comes into play, because you're trying to ensure that there is a good water quality, there is a good air quality, and all of these are also linked with the water pollution and the amount of air pollution in that area. And if there is a significant amount of air pollution, of course the air quality is going to be worse. So you try and also take a look at the health of the environment in the area and how that impacts the human health. And then you carry out research about the area, about the diseases and how the disease is spreading. So for example, if a new disease outbreak has happened in a particular population or in populations across the world, your first step is to carry out a research about what the disease is, how it is being caused, what causes it. Is it viral? Is it caused by a parasite? Is it caused by a bacteria? How is it spreading? How is it being transmitted from, if it is a communicable disease, how is it getting transmitted from people to people? And then you also try and find out what are different treatments or what are different vaccines, what are different fronts at which you can attack the disease and try and control it. And you come up with vaccinations, you come up with medicines to treat the disease. And then so all this research has to be carried out. So you take a look at if there were certain specific things that the population was doing which made it more prone to that disease, or if that disease is just spreading, and how is it transmitted? Has it been coming from other people, other animals, and things like that? So there is a lot that goes into public health. That is why it's an interdisciplinary field, because there are so many disciplines. There is social sciences, there is biology, there is ecology, there is environmentalism. Everything is coming together. Medicine and pharma, all of this is coming together. And a lot, especially all the medical officers, all of them come together, and then public health is taken care of. Okay, fine. Moving on. So here is
First of all, let's have a look at what health is.
public
The
health.
World Health Organization defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. This is a bold and ambitious definition that encourages people to look beyond diseases and focus not only on the physical aspect of health, but also the mental and social aspects as well. And public health? Well, public health is the science and art of preventing disease, prolonging life, and promoting health through the organized efforts of society. Okay, so how is it different to clinical medicine? Let's take a look at an example. Imagine someone has a car accident and fractures their leg. A clinician's main focus is the immediate health issue, fixing the fracture. Clinicians focus on the individual. The public health approach would be holistic and focus on figuring out how and why this person had an accident so that actions can be taken to prevent it from happening again. For example, why did he have the accident? Was there a problem with his vision? Did he have inadequate driving skills or a poor attitude towards driving? Was he under the influence of alcohol or drugs when he was driving? Were there laws against this and resources to enforce it? What were the community expectations or norms around driving? Did he have a good social support network to help his recovery and prevent this from happening again? Did digital media contribute to the accident? Was the road he was driving on safe? Were there any commercial factors, such as vehicles in the market with inadequate safety features? Was he driving a car that was well maintained? If not, why not? Could he not afford it? If so, why not? Did he have a job that didn't pay well? Why is that? Was it because he didn't have access to a good education? Were there good health services to support his treatment and recovery? Were they accessible? As you can see from this example, health is determined by a complex interaction between many different factors or determinants of health. These include who they are, what they do, and the conditions in which they're born, grow, live, work, and age, the social determinants of health. It also includes commercial and digital determinants of health. So to make a difference in health, it's important to understand these determinants and how they interact with each other in order to address them. Public health focuses on upstream factors to make changes that can benefit the health of the population as a whole. This seems like a very broad and complex task, doesn't it? So let's have a look at how public health works. The World Federation of Public Health Associations has developed a useful framework to understand this. There are three core service areas of public health and a group of enablers that ensure that these services can occur effectively and efficiently. The three core areas of public health are protection, promotion, and prevention. Protection is about protecting the health of the population. This includes controlling infectious diseases, managing environmental hazards, ensuring a healthy workplace, and managing health emergencies. Promotion is about improving the health of the population. It covers a broad range of activities that not only focus on the individual, such as promoting health behaviors over a life course, it also focuses on addressing the determinants of health. Prevention is about preventing health issues before they occur. It includes activities such as vaccination and screening. To enable these core areas to function, there needs to be good governance. Advocacy to influence and obtain support and commitment for actions that support a health goal. Capacity, having an adequate, well-trained, and supported public health workforce, and having accurate, timely information to support health actions, such as relevant research, surveillance, monitoring, and evaluation. So, who is responsible for public health? Ultimately, the responsibility of creating a healthy population lies with all sectors of society. While health departments have a central role in public health, improving the health of a population requires coordinated efforts from a wide range of stakeholders and sectors. They include other areas of government, the private sector, non-governmental organizations, international organizations, and local communities, and across various sectors such as education, finance, employment, housing, agriculture, veterinary, environment, and others, all united with a shared goal of improving the health of the public. While public health has made significant strides, several ongoing challenges continue to pose serious threats to health. These include climate change, antimicrobial resistance, the emergence and spread of infectious diseases with pandemic potential, healthcare in fragile, conflict-affected, and vulnerable settings, as well as the increasing burden of non-communicable diseases. Addressing these challenges will require commitment and the coordinated and collaborative efforts of all sectors of society. And that's a quick introduction to the fascinating field of public health.
I hope this video was I hope this video was helpful in understanding what is public health and what it encompasses and who are the people involved in maintaining the public health and which are the different sectors that actually play a good role in public health organization, and then what are the different, like, how is public health different from other types of care, for example individual oriented medical care, and how different things undercome public health. It's not just it, as the video said, there is promotion, prevention, and protection that comes into play when you're talking about public health. So there are these three different factors. When you're talking about protection, you're trying to protect the people from the spread of infectious diseases, from certain environmental hazards, and talking from different work hazards that people might be facing in their occupancies. When you're talking about promotion, you're trying to promote the social well-being and the emotional and mental well-being of people. Talking about prevention, you're trying to prevent the spread of diseases by vaccinating people or by asking people to get themselves screened against cancer or upcoming diseases, things like that. And that is what all comes under public health. Now let's see what were different pathways that can be taken to promote public health. Number one, there could be population level activities. So in population level activities, some things are like trying to maintain a good air quality index and a good water quality index in that particular area, trying to vaccinate all the children and adults in that area against all the majorly spreading diseases, try and take care of safety rules, whether they're on the road or they're in general in the workplace, different hazards people might face. So try and prevent these accidents that can actually occur if people are not being careful, and try and spread awareness about all these things, trying to make people aware about different sanitation activities, about how, for example, say open defecation is bad for the population. So try and make people aware of how these different things can impact them and what is a good way to go about it, and what are some good practices that they should take care of, right? So this is some population level activities, and there are individual level activities in which you can try and promote people to do certain to imbibe certain of these good habits. For example, telling people to consume nutritious food, but not just telling people, but also making it available for people. You cannot just ask someone to consume good food if it's not available to them, if they cannot afford the good food. So you have to address it at different levels. If you are promoting consumption of nutritious food, you have to make people aware about it. Then you have to make the food available to the people, that it should be present in their area for them to buy, to make it affordable so that they are able to buy these nutritious foods that we're talking about. Telling people, okay, then making people aware about the importance of washing hands and washing them properly. Telling them about quit smoking, to quit drinking, to be exercising regularly, and promoting the use of contraceptives, how that is important for for reproductive health for men and women. And talking about menstrual hygiene, and how use of sanitation or sanitary napkins is important to promote um, reproductive health again in these cases. So these are some ways in which, on an individual level, you can promote health. Then there are a lot of questions that can be asked in public health, and they, again, because public health deals with a broader scenario, these questions also come at different levels. So you could be asking individual level questions. For example, how is caffeine consumption affecting anemia? So uh, how is anemia being affected by caffeine consumption? Then how is the availability of contraceptives affecting the reproductive health of women? So you could be coming at all of these correlations present in the population if you're studying them. Then there could be questions at a community level, at a population level, about how is the presence of open, for example, how is the presence of certain open defecation, how is that impacting the nutrition and health of the residents of that area? Then you could be asking countrywide questions or state level questions, in which you're talking about things like how has the overuse of antibiotics led to the resistance, and how is it making it difficult to fight infections? How is it impacting the ability to fight infections? So these are certain questions that can be asked in public health, and once you've asked these questions, then only can you set up the public health interventions or different interventions that medical officers, or in general the stakeholders involved in public health, can take. So certain basic public health interventions that can be taken is spreading awareness, educating people, making it possible for them to lead a healthy life and to make healthy choices. By making it possible, it means that you need to take care that these healthy life choices are also affordable to people, they're also available to people. So you need to address it at different levels, and you could be providing them open spaces, for example gardens and parks, for where people can go out and walks, they can exercise, they can take in fresh air, and they can keep themselves active. And you could be regulating the supply of medicines in the area, the food supply, maintaining the air and the water quality of the area, so that it's healthy enough for people to live in, and so that it promotes their health, and prevents the diseases that might happen in the presence of not good or not adequate medicines and food, in the absence of the adequate supply of these things. So these are some different public health interventions that can be taken. And moving on to talking about if public health addresses the just the physical health or the mental health of people as well. So early on, public health was all about talking about physical health and physical diseases, but lately the promotion of well-being and mental health has come into the picture. As you saw in the video also, when the person was explaining WHO's definition of health, very clearly it states the physical and the social and the mental well-being of the person or of the individuals, right? So in public health now, they also include the mental well-being and of the individuals and the populations in general. And for this, you could be spreading, or for public health interventions, there could be a spread of awareness about depression, about anxiety, what these things are, what are their some symptoms, and even about some severe diseases, some severe conditions, for example schizophrenia, and addressing it and making people aware of these things, and taking away the taboo that is often associated with certain mental health issues. So you have to create an environment in which mental health issue is not a taboo, but actually can be treated and dealt with appropriately. People are sensitized in order to not look at other individuals who might be struggling with certain mental health issues, and to actually help them to make the society more inclusive for such people, and so that they are not, looked down upon or looked at like differently as compared to other people who might not be facing mental health issues. Honestly, in today's world, I feel most of us are, facing certain or other challenges in our life, certain mental health issues, and it's important for all of us to make it, you know to get rid of this taboo, to get rid of this thought that mental health issues cannot be talked about openly. It is time for everybody to come out and discuss these things more openly, and deal with these things together as a society as well. So that is how public health is also now focusing upon mental health as well. Moving on to public health in India, how is India dealing with these public health issues and public health drives? So in India, actually, it's the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare which deals with public health. And if you talk about it, Indian Constitution does not really guarantee health right to health anywhere. So in our constitution, there is no right to health as such, but there are certain other articles which talk about fundamental right to life, the right to personal liberty, and in general, right to food, right to adequate housing, all of these things. And when you combine all of these things as a byproduct, there is a talk about right to health, but it is not, directly, it's not written anywhere about right to health. But now this is being rectified, and a lot of the states with their own state constitutions have come up with the right to health, and they have been setting up policies to deal with this. And you can look at this website. This is a website of the Indian Public Health Standards, IPHS, in which they're trying to um, in which they in which you can see that they have listed what are the total number of health facilities that are currently existing in India, how many of these have actually been assessed, and what is the score of the facilities. So you see, so these facility scores based on how well they're doing and how well they're equipped to help the patients. And out of the 2 lakh total health facilities, or 2 lakh 1,000 facilities that are present in the country, only 30,000 facilities actually score 80% and above. Most of them lie below 80%. So from 50% to 7 to 80%, there are around 1 lakh facilities. And after that, there are around 90,000 facilities that are even less than 50,000. So they're not at all equipped properly to treat with the patients, to deal with the kind of diseases that might show up. So there are some challenges that India is still facing with public health, because we're still a developing country and not a lot of money is being invested into public health. But the country, as a country, we're trying to improve the public health of the country. Let's see in a little more detail what are these different health facilities that we're talking about. So, in India, the health system is actually organized in a way that at the primary level, you have these medical officers, or you have these ASHAs. Um, the name actually stands for accredited social health activists. So these are people who are directly in touch with on the ground level with the populations out there. And then there are these sub health centers, SHCs, which cover approximately a population of 3 to 5,000 people, and they're the primary healthcare providers. And then you move on to primary health centers. To a primary health center, around 4 to 5 sub health centers report, and they cover around 20 to 30,000 of the population, and they are equipped with having medical officers, some kind of a laboratory, some blood testing units, and some x-ray machines and certain beds to hospitalize people, and some obstetricians to take care of um, childbirth and things like that. And then when you move on to a little higher level, there are community health centers and their sub-district hospitals. They cover around 80,000 to 1 lakh of the population, and they are set up to take care of that. And then after this, there's a tertiary level in which you could talk about district hospitals and medical college hospitals, which actually take care of even bigger populations than 80 to 12 to 1 lakh 20,000. And there are around 750 of these in our country at the moment. And yeah, So this is how the health system is organized in our country. And yeah, there is a severe lack of facilities and even of human resources at these different levels. But uh, the country or the government is trying to improve it as we move forward. So now let's talk about how is the public health funded. What is the funding the public health receives in India? So health falls under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, as I already discussed, and the annual budget is around 80,000 crores for uh, the public health, and it is funded by state funding. So every state gives certain funding separately from this 80,000 crore that is given at a central from the central government. And this covers both direct services of care provision and also capital expenditures of the infrastructure that comes in these different health centers that we just discussed. And but if you talk about how much funding it's given as a percentage of the GDP, it is one of the lowest in the world in India. And in India, one another thing that we notice is that India has amongst the highest out of pocket expenditure related to healthcare. So we every individual as a family, Indians end up spending a lot more money out of their pocket for taking care of their health, for paying for medicines, for paying for treatments, for paying for surgeries, as compared to other countries in the world, in which insurance and government funding works and helps them to deal with their health. So, but India has made some progress in its public health. After independence, there are some things that we have achieved. We have improved our life expectancy, which has increased from 32 to 70. So, earlier at birth, the life expectancy average was 32 years of age. Now it has been improved to 70. We have reduced the infant and maternal mortality rates considerably. We have been successful in eradicating smallpox and polio entirely. India was like announced polio free in 2014. And then the amount of malnutrition in the country has also been reduced to half. So these are some leaps and bounds that India has achieved in the public health sector. But there are certain things that still need to be addressed in our country. For example, there's a lot of bias that comes in the picture when you talk about public health in India. So the health improvements that have been being made in the country are not uniformly distributed through all sections of the society. And but all of these come with their biases. There are biases based on caste, there are biases based on the amount of money the people have, on where the people are coming from. Are they coming from rural areas or from urban areas? What is the sex of the individual? Are you talking about males or females? What's the religion? Things like that. And often, as you might already expect, it's the upper caste, the urban populations, and the males that are faring much better, even in terms of receiving public health or receiving healthcare, as compared to the lower castes, the other castes, and rural populations. And females are doing much worse than the males in a lot of these conditions. We will be discussing about this a little more in detail. But yeah, females suffer from a lot more from anemia as well in the country. And there are, in general, there is a bias that exists in this Indian public healthcare. And as I discussed, in our health organization system, there is a severe lack of human resources as well. And that is also because uh, either the facilities are inadequate, or the payment, like the salaries that these healthcare officers receive, is not up to the mark. That it's not that we have, first of all, we have less students that are in the medical sector or in the public healthcare sector, because of a low number of medical colleges. But that is being corrected, because a lot more medical colleges are being set up, especially at least one per district is being set up in the country. But once students get educated from these areas, they either head out, they move on to other opportunities, they're better paying opportunities. So if the government makes this a good paid job, in which the people are respected, in which the healthcare providers are respected properly, and then only will these medical officers stay. These medical officers are very important when it comes to public healthcare, because they are the first points of contact with the patients directly. And their training needs to be adequate in order to deal with different healthcare conditions, different disease conditions. They, first of all, people will only seek out healthcare if they trust the medical officers, if they trust the healthcare facilities. If they go, for example, if somebody is sick and they go to a healthcare center and they're not treated properly, they're disrespected, or they're not, they do not receive the appropriate care, then of course the next time they get sick, they will not even bother going to the healthcare center, and that will lead to a loss in the public healthcare of the country. So in order to make these in order to improve the public healthcare, we need to actually have a properly trained staff, when the health center should be well equipped with the facilities. And so you need to retain the students that have actually studied out of the medical colleges of the country into the public healthcare sector. Because, and that will happen only if there is a proper payment, proper facilities for the doctors to work with. Another thing is, even at the nurses level, since there's a lot of hierarchy that exists in the public in healthcare in general, um, they don't wish to stay in these public health centers. And so not just the doctors but the patients, both sides need to be made well aware about how to make the best out of these available facilities and use it to improve their own health, right? So moving on to some of these statistics, so we'll see how there is a bias that exists in how people get treatment. So you look at this graph here, you see on the y-axis they're talking about what is the under 5 mortality rate per 1,000 live births. So if you have 1,000 live births, what is the under 5 mortality rate? So very clearly from these pictures you can see that the rich, the people with more education, people who come from urban areas, and males fare much better than poor people and people who receive less education, people who come from rural environments, and females. So, in at least in this under 5 mortality rate, it has become much better. The difference between male and female is kind of, the gap is reducing. But in all the others, in being the difference between poor and rich, in the amount of education and in their geography, you can see very clearly how certain sectors get much better care, or are able to capable of accessing, they have access to much better care as compared to the other sectors of the society. Moving on to, again, under 5 mortality, when you look at state wise, so if you see uh, state domestic product per capita, so here you see the under 5 mortality is much lower for Kerala, and but it is, and the size of the circle is proportional to the state population, and Kerala has a small, not a very big population, and the under 5 mortality is much larger for Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, right? And their domestic per capita is also much lower. So these are some things that play a role in how much product per capita also the state has, how much they're investing into the public health domain. So there are different factors that impact how the people of these states are faring. And okay, let's take a look at what are some major healthcare initiatives that India has made from the year 2005 to the year 2021. So, from 2005, India has started the National Rural Health Mission, which was later subsumed into the National Health Mission itself. Then in 2014, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan was released and Mission Indradhanush was also released. Then in 2015 to 16, there was the National List of Essential Medicines that was revised. Then Free Drug and Diagnostic Service was started. Maternity Benefits Act was given. Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana and National Dialysis Program for people who have kidney problems, and the Digital India campaign, all of these things came into play. In 2017, there was a National Strategic Plan for TB elimination, HIV and AIDS Act, Mental Health Care Act, mental health came into the picture, and then National Health Policy. In 2018, there have been different policies like Ayushman Bharat, Health and Wellness Centers, Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, these things, Poshan Abhiyan for fighting malnutrition. In 2021, there have been things like the health infrastructure mission, improving the infrastructure of the healthcare centers, the digital mission, digitization of health and health cards, and giving policies and the schemes for pharmaceuticals. So many initiatives India has been making for improving the public health of the country, but we do, somewhere or the other, we fall short, and there are many gaps that we still as a country need to fill to become better at, to get better at our public health initiatives. Right. So, what is the public healthcare scenario in India? So, the source of this image is actually the National Family Health Survey that was carried out, National Family Health Survey 3. So, now we've reached the fifth survey, which was carried out recently in 2021. So, this is a little old, it comes from 2018, but still, let's take a look at how the public healthcare scenario in India is. So, India is ranked 130 on the Human Development Index, right? And there is one allopathic government doctor on an average which attends to 11,000 patients. So only one doctor, government doctor, on an average attends 11,000 patients, which you can make sure are a lot of patients, right? um, then there is 1.3% of the GDP is spent on public health care, which is very less to the global average of 6%. So globally, the average amount of GDP spent on the public health of the nation is actually 6%, and India only spends around 1.3%, which has improved only to 1.9% now recently, which is still one third of the average global GDP that's spent on public health. And 65% of women belonging to tribal populations, they're anemic against the 47% in the general population. So, as we said, certain sectors are faring better than the others. The mortality of children below the age of 5 is 50 per 50,000 births, which is 61% higher in tribal areas. Again, the different sectors are faring differently. Immunization coverage, it's 62% amongst children between the ages of 12 to 23 months. So 62% is not a very high number when you come to immunization and vaccination. And maternal mortality ratio is 130 per 1 lakh live births. So for 1 lakh births, 130 females lose their lives. Right. So, again, looking at the health report card, so as we discussed, so if you look at the total amount of public health facilities in India, so there are about 767 public district hospitals. The sub health centers, which was the lowest level of care, there are around 1.5 lakhs of sub health centers. Then there are primary health centers, there are around 30,000 of the primary health centers in the country. And there are 6,000 community health centers and 1,200 sub district hospitals. So even though the number of facilities that were accessed, so out of these, the number of facilities, so total public health facilities in India is around 2 lakh, which is quite a lot. But the number of health facilities that were assessed is only 40,000. And even out of those assessed, most of them fall under less than 50%, being equipped less than 50%. So the quality of these facilities needs to be improved much more for Indians to get access to better public health care, right? Okay, so looking at certain outcomes from the National Family Health Survey. So, when you look at the National Family Health Survey, you see that when you talk about malnutrition, wasting is when a child has low body weight compared to his or her height. So, compared to height, if the body weight of the child is low, then the child is sort of becoming more and more. If the nutrition is low, the child might be a little malnourished. So the wasting among children is under the age of 5. So if you see, according to the National Health Survey 5, National Family Health Survey number 5, which was carried out in 2019 2021, it has gotten worse. So here you can see in these states of Gujarat and Maharashtra especially, so a lot, there are so many more there are so many more children who are suffering from wasting. Karnataka and Jharkhand have made some improvements, but other states like Uttar Pradesh has gotten worse. Madhya Pradesh has also made some improvement over time. Haryana has made a lot of these improvements. But yeah, Ladakh has gotten worse. So these are some things to note when you look at the family health survey that was recently carried out. But if you look at anemia in women, so according to the 2016 survey, so for women aged between 15 to 45, the anemia was highest in Ladakh and then in Jharkhand and Haryana. Now, if you see after in 2021, a lot of the states have actually done worse in Gujarat, in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, all of these states and all of the eastern part, they have done much worse. Even here in um, states like Punjab and here Jammu Kashmir, they have done worse than before, and people and the number of women with anemia has actually increased in these states. When you look at obesity among men from 15 to 49 years, again you see that the number of obese men in India are increasing. So the population is also suffering from obesity, and the awareness needs to be spread about these things, about anemia, about obesity. Awareness needs to be spread about such conditions so that people can actually lead healthier lifestyles. And as we discussed, the availability of open spaces needs to be such things need to be procured so that people can go out, take a walk, become healthier. And there should be initiatives. For example, as we celebrate National Yoga Day, there should be more such initiatives in which exercise on an individual level is being promoted so that people can improve their health. And because obesity leads to many more diseases, heart conditions, diabetes, and things like that, so it's important to take care of such conditions as well. Okay, so the current health burden of the country includes dealing with MMR and IMR, maternal mortality rate and infant mortality rate, dealing with malnutrition, dealing with anemia among women and in populations in general, then dealing with infectious diseases like tuberculosis and malaria and things like that, dealing with cancer and other non-communicable diseases like cardiovascular diseases and diabetes and hypertension, and dealing with mental health issues. That is also very important because first of all, India has very low awareness among people about mental health, and most of the mental health issues are considered taboo. So there is a lot more work that needs to go into all of these sectors, right? So now, coming to a small case study about rotavirus. So, you might have heard about viruses in general, but you might not have heard about rotavirus. So, I will give you a small introduction about this disease called rotavirus. And first of all, let's talk about what are viruses and how do they cause infections. So, viruses, as you all might be aware, they're not cells, they're just some genetic material which is enclosed in a protein shell, right? And outside of the host cells, the viruses, they exist as free particles which are called virions. Okay, and they mostly contain a DNA or an RNA genome and inside a protein shell which is called the capsid. And mostly viruses, they lack their own metabolism and they depend on the host cell and the host cell's metabolism for its reproduction. So viruses cannot reproduce when they're outside of the host cell. They need to enter a host cell, hijack its machinery, and then only can they reproduce and make more copies of themselves. So again, viruses are the type of organism that fall in the boundary of living or non-living. So you should take some time to think about it. Would you consider viruses as living or non-living? Because if you keep them out in the open on their own, they cannot multiply, and they mostly just have a genome and a protein shell. They don't even have metabolism, but they can cause infections. They infect live organisms and they multiply by the help of using other live organisms. So we need to think whether you would categorize viruses as living or non-living. And the viruses are responsible for causing a lot of widespread illnesses, for example, smallpox, dengue, chikungunya, measles, chickenpox, and polio. So, how do viruses affect or infect a cell? Basically, what happens is a virus and the virus's code proteins, they attach to a cell. So there are certain so virus also has certain code proteins, and the cells also have certain cell surface proteins. And when the viruses recognize these cell surface proteins, they attach to the cell and then they enter it, and then they're encapsulated into an endosome mostly. Upon entering, the viruses, the capsid gets removed and the virus genome gets released into the host cell. This viral genome actually hijacks the host's machinery, and it undergoes transcription and translation, which makes much more copies of the viral genome and the viral protein shell, which is the capsid. And then the viral gets assembled, the viral particles, they get assembled inside the host cell, and then a lot of these viruses are released and the host cell in the process gets lysed and dies. So this is how viruses infect host cells. And so now let's discuss what is rotavirus. Rotavirus is a kind of virus which infects young children, mostly less than 5 years of age, and it causes gastroenteritis. How does it do that? Is that it infects the enterocytes, which are cells in our intestines. So it infects enterocytes and it causes malabsorption. Malabsorption is when our small intestine is basically responsible for absorbing all of the nutrition that we from our food. So we eat food, and when it gets into the small intestine, that is where all the nutrients get absorbed from the food. So when rotavirus happens, it infects the enterocytes, and it causes malabsorption. So these nutrients are not getting absorbed by the body, and it leads to diarrhea and to severe dehydration because you're not absorbing nutrients in water, anything. So it leads to a lot of dehydration as well, as there is a lot of diarrhea, and then eventually hospitalization, and sometimes it can be fatal enough to cause death. Transmission. So mostly transmission of rotavirus is happens via zoonosis, and zoonotic transmission involves when animals or non-human animals, the disease gets transferred from them into humans, and it mostly in this case it happens via the fecal oral route. So if you're eating some contaminated food, or if your hands are contaminated with the virus, and then you're eating using those hands, then you can get this disease. So it happens by the fecal oral route, or if you come in contact with contaminated objects, or when with contaminated or infected people, particularly the children who might be suffering from rotavirus. And so this is what rotavirus looks like, and the name is rotavirus because of the appearance. It looks like a wheel, and with all of these edges, that is why the name rotavirus. And it comprises of a genome in which has 11 double stranded RNA strands. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So there are 11 double stranded RNA molecules, and along with that there are viral proteins. There are 6 viral proteins and 6 non-structural proteins. So this genome encodes 6 viral proteins. So you can see here you have a VP1, VP2, VP3, VP4, VP5, VP6, right? So there are 6 viral proteins and there are 6 non-structural proteins. So this is what comprises of a um, rotavirus. And how does rotavirus multiply? How does it infect? Is that the viral proteins, or the code proteins of the virus, they recognize the cell surface protein here. So and they attach to the cell. So this line indicates outside of the cell, inside of the cell. So they attach to the cell, and then they get via endocytosis, they get taken up, they get engulfed by the cell, and they are inside the endosome. Inside the endosome, uncoating happens, and this outside coat of the virus gets taken out with the proteins, and then the rest of it is comes out the endosome. And then from this, the RNA molecules, they get transcripted and translated, and they again code for all of these proteins, the viral proteins and the non-structural proteins. And then this is then packaged again into a virus, and multiple of these viruses enter the cell, and multiple many copies of these viruses are created. And the virus, after RNA multiplication and RNA also getting transcribed and translated into these viral proteins, they get assembled and then they get released out of the cell, and in this process they lead to the cell lysis, and killing or death of the cell, the host cell. So, how do you study the viruses? So, to study different things in biology, you can use different model organisms. So, here's an example of some model organisms. You can see here is a zebrafish, here is a C. elegans, here is a Drosophila, here is a mouse, a rat, corn, and Escherichia coli. There are all of these different budding yeast, all of these different model organisms that can be used by researchers to understand certain specific things. So if you're talking about, say, for example, there are primates also that you can use. So if you're talking about, say, sleep cycles, and if you want to study human sleep cycles, you would actually use a primate, right, as a model organism, because that is something that's closest to humans in its sleep schedule and how it happens. So you could use mice in other scenarios. Then, if you're talking about things like cell division, then you might prefer to use budding yeast or Escherichia coli or C. elegans if you want to look at cell division. If you're looking at development, you might want to look at Drosophila, or you might want to look at zebrafish or C. elegans. If you're talking about genetics, you might want to look at Drosophila because a lot of its genome is known, and it's known how a lot of the populations carry on. And so these are different ways in which you can use different model organisms. So what happened in the case of rotavirus was Saxena et al. They actually made human intestinal enteroids. So apart from all these model organisms, there is something called organoids. And what happens is, in organoids, you take cells and certain specific tissue cells, And if you're giving them proper culture, proper media, they can actually develop into certain small rudimentary organs. So these rudimentary organs, they cannot actually perform the entire function of an organ, but they do behave a little bit like the organ. So you can use them to study certain disease and the disease spread. So that is what happened. Saxena et al. They made human intestinal enteroids, which are shortened as HIOs. They made them in the lab, and they actually cultured them from cells taken from the small intestines of infected adults, right? So this is how the organoids look like. So you basically take the cell from here and then you culture it, and then you get something like this, which is a 3D enteroid, right? And then what they did is they wanted to see host specificity in the rotavirus strains. So there are a lot of these strains of rotavirus, and they wanted to see how specific is it to the host. So you see here, when they infected the human intestinal enteroids with these different viruses, with mock, which does not contain any virus, then with animal viruses, and then with human viruses, you see in animal viruses the percentage of infection is much lower, significantly lower than in human viruses. So these viruses are actually very host specific. So you see that these rotaviruses were host specific, and that is how eventually the vaccination, an indigenous vaccination, was developed for rotavirus in India. So what happened was, doctors from AIMS, they discovered a strain of rotavirus which was infecting newborns, but it was not leading to an illness. So in a USA India vaccine program, the National Institute of Health, NIH of USA, and the Department of Biotechnology in India, they funded the phase 1 clinical trials. And after completing them, there was an involvement of NGOs and AIMS and THSTI. And the phase 3 trials were conducted across multiple centers in India. And then Bharat Biotech also became a partner, making a public private partnership. And then WHO supported the use of Rotovac with continued surveillance. And then eventually, the Rotovac, which is the vaccination for rotavirus, developed from this virus which was infecting the newborns but did not cause an illness. So if you give that as a vaccination to other newborns, they will actually develop antibiotics, or antibodies against this virus. And then eventually in 2016, Rotavac was actually introduced into the into the universal immunization program. So that is how indigenously vaccine was developed for rotavirus in India. Okay. Coming to our last case study for today, and this is the last topic for today, let's discuss malaria. So, you might already be pretty well aware about malaria because it has been uh, a thoroughly discussed topic in the medical arena. So, some basic info or some basic things that you might already be aware about malaria. So, I would like to ask these questions, put them in forward, and you might try and answer these questions to get an idea of whether you were already aware about this or not. So, how is malaria transmitted from one person to another? So, are you aware about how malaria gets transmitted from one person to another? How can malaria be prevented by individuals and communities? What actions can individuals and communities take in order to prevent the spread of malaria? What are some treatments that are available for malaria? How does the environment influence the prevalence of malaria? How does the environment around you and what kind of conditions are there in the environment influence how prevalent malaria will be there? Why do you think that this disease from ancient times continues to be a global problem even in the modern day? So what is it that makes it such a problem even today, even though this disease has been around for so long, but we've still not found like we've still not eradicated the disease altogether? And are there similarities between the origin and spread of malarial parasite and the novel coronavirus in the human population? These are some questions that I would, or the faculties of the course would like you to think about and ponder on your own and get to the answers of these. Some of these you'll get the answers even in the next few slides. Some of these you'll have to think about a little more. So, talking about malaria. So, malaria comes from the Italian word which means mal, which means bad, and area, which means air, because the disease was believed to be spread by bad vapors. So, in early 1800s, there was this miasma theory, according to which the disease was being caused by bad vapors which were rising from the ground or from decaying matter present in the ground. And this theory was actually disproved by germ theory, according to which we were then aware that diseases are not just spread by some vapors or air, they're actually spread by germs or parasites, or these invisible bacteria, viruses present around us. So by these different germs, diseases were spread, and not just by some vapors or bad air. Then Charles Laveran, here in this image, you can see this is Charles Laveran. What he did was he studied the blood from malarial patients, and he looked at it under his microscope, and he's found certain pigmented bodies. So, like here, you can see these are the pigmented bodies. Um, these little dots that are present inside. So, and these different forms, some of these, like figure 7, figure 8, even has these filaments. So he recognized four different forms of these pigmented bodies in humans. And then he was the one who discovered that malaria is being caused by parasites. These are parasites, that different figures seen in this image. So these are parasites, and malaria is being caused by parasites, and he received a Nobel Prize for his discovery. Then what happened is, so first of all, we figured out, so first theory was that malaria is being caused by bad air, and this was disproved by germ theory. And then came Charles Lavran, who actually studied the blood and found out that, okay, no, malaria is being caused by these parasites. Then what happened? Then our next step was to figure out where are these parasites coming from, right? So there was this person called Sir Patrick Manson, and he discovered that mosquitoes act as a vector for filarial worms in humans. So not talking about malaria, but he figured out in this time that filarial worms were the germs for filaria or filarial worms were actually being transferred by mosquitoes. Then this served as an inspiration for Sir Ronald Ross, and Ronald Ross was actually a medical officer in India from British, because at that point India was being colonized by the British. So he was a medical officer, and so the things that we were aware of by that time. So some things were, first of all, malarial parasite. It resides in the human liver cells. So human liver cells is where the parasite is found. It infects RBCs, which contains pigmented bodies, which are called hemozoins. So RBCs, so these parasite infects. So so patients have infected RBCs, and these infected RBCs contain these pigmented bodies called hemozoins. And then he himself, Sir Ronald Ross, observed that mosquitoes with dappled wings, they occurred in areas with endemic malaria. So, in areas in India where malaria was endemic to that area, not spreading out of that area, in those areas there was these mosquito that was found, which is a one with dappled wings. So he hypothesized that malaria vectors are mosquitoes. So mosquitoes are the vectors for malaria. The question was, first of all, can mosquito carry malarial parasite? So is mosquito capable of carrying the parasite for malaria? So for this, how he went about his methodology involved that he collected larvae of mosquitoes from stagnant ponds and stagnant clear water. He collected larvae and then he cultured them to get adults. So it took him a long time to actually master this technique of culturing mosquito larvae in the lab. And but eventually he did it, and he cultured the larvae and into adults. Then he fed them blood meals from a malarial patient. So he paid a patient who was suffering from malaria and got blood from him, and then he used to feed this blood to his cultured adult mosquitoes, and then he dissected these mosquitoes and observed what is going on inside them with his microscope. And he found that these pigmented bodies are stored in the salivary glands of the mosquitoes. Now, the next question was, okay, so malaria is being carried by mosquitoes, but can mosquitoes infect other organisms? So for this, he used birds as a model system, and he did find that birds that were bitten by mosquitoes carrying the parasite actually got infected by malaria. So the mosquito is capable of infecting. After this, it was Giovanni Bassetti. One second. Yeah. So it was Giovanni Battista who finally proved it in humans that yes, is actually responsible for infecting humans with this plasmodium parasite. Right. So this is how scientifically it was found out. This is the scientific process that was followed to actually see, okay, first we knew malaria, we knew the symptoms of malaria, trying to figure out how it infects the human beings. Thought that it was bad air, but then figured out it was not bad air and it's some germ. Then somebody studied the blood from infected patients and found that it's actually certain parasite. Then somebody else figured out that mosquito is a vector for certain worms, and that led somebody else to believe that mosquito might also be responsible for transferring malarial parasite as well, if it can transfer filarial worms. And then they actually carried out these different well thought of experiments and found out that yes, mosquito is able to can transmit malaria from person to person. So this was a scientific process that was followed, and detailed observations were made and innovation and critical thinking went into it, into designing these experiments, and eventually they communicated their results properly with the other people. Now, this is something you might have already seen. It's the life cycle of Plasmodium. Um, so you would have seen this image earlier also in your, so it is actually taught in schools. So this is what the life cycle of Plasmodium looks like. So it's a parasite which has half of its life cycle happening in mosquitoes and half of it happening in humans. So a mosquito, the first step is that a mosquito bites a human and it transmits a motile sporocyte into the humans. So that's the first step. So mosquito transmits a motile sporocyte to a human after biting them, right? Then what happens is this sporocyte, it travels to the blood vessels and it goes to the liver cells. Then in the liver cells, these sporocytes, they reproduce asexually, and they then produce thousands of merozoites. So they reproduce asexually and they produce this thing called merozoites, and these merozoites, they leave the liver, enter into the bloodstream, and they infect the red blood cells. In the red blood cells, so these are the pigmented bodies that we see in the red blood cells, and these infected red blood cells, what happens is after like 2 to 3 days, these red blood cells, they keep on lysing, rupturing, which leads to cyclical fevers in malarial patients. So they develop a fever, and then they become okay, and then after 2 3 days they develop a fever again. That is because the red blood cells are being lysed by these merocytes over a period of 2 3 days. And then some of these merocytes, they develop into precursors of male and female gametes, so they form gametocytes. Then what happens is, then another mosquito might come and bite this human which is already infected by malaria, and it will take up these gametocytes. So when a mosquito bites an infected person, these gametocytes are being taken up by the mosquito, and they enter the mosquito gut. And these male and female gametocytes, they fuse and they form a zygote inside the mosquito, and then these develop into new sporocytes and they go and sit into the mosquito's salivary glands, and again the cycle keeps on continuing. So this is what the life cycle of Plasmodium looks like. Okay. And now coming to the cures of malaria. So what happened was in 1920s, it was found that quinine, which actually has, which is found primarily in the bark of cinchona tree. And cinchona tree is a tree from Peru, and it was found that in cinchona bark has an ingredient called quinine, which is effective against malaria, and it was very widely used throughout the world to treat malarial patients. And because it was so widely used, and eventually now we had quinine resistant forms of the malarial parasite, because evolution happens and there is an evolutionary race, and if you are trying to eradicate something, that thing will evolve, and that is why we have resistance that develops over time, and now the parasite survives again. Then 50 years later, so after this, what happened was, there was a war between USA and Vietnam, which was happening in the dense forests of Vietnam, which were hot and humid, and a lot of these soldiers that are fighting there were developing malaria, and this malaria that they were developing was actually quinine resistant. So a lot of these soldiers were losing their lives, and there was a lot of pressure all over the world to develop another treatment for malaria. And 50 years later, there was this researcher called Tu, and she was carrying out this project in China. So she was a Chinese researcher, and she was heading this project, which was aimed at finding the a treatment for malaria. And what she was doing is she screened a lot of ancient Chinese texts, because there are a lot of ancient texts that exist against different diseases. And she read all these texts for any disease that had similar symptoms to malaria. And she uh, found so many different drugs that she came across 640 different recipes of drugs that from her screening. And after that, eventually she found that this one herb, Qinghao, is actually being effective against malaria. But it was not working out because it was not that effective also. Then what she figured out was, in the text when she surveyed properly, that Qinghao is a herb that you are supposed to administer to the patient without boiling it into water, without heating it. Otherwise, In all other drugs, mostly in the Chinese texts, what you find is that you have to boil and heat the drug in water and then administer it. But for Qing Hao, that was not the case. So when she did that, she found that, okay, yeah, the active ingredient found in the Qing Hao herb is actually artemisinin, artemisinin, and it gets destroyed when you heat it up. So artemisinin was present in Qing Hao, and this was found to be 100% effective against malaria in all the cases, in 100% cases. And this was very quickly, all the clinical trials were carried out, and it was fast tracked, and these it was sent to the Vietnam soldiers for them to treat themselves. And now WHO actually recommends an artemisinin combo therapy for treating malaria. And Tu Youyou finally, eventually, much later, got her Nobel Prize in 2015 for her discovery of this drug to treat malaria. Now we keep talking about prevention and how we need to prevent all these disease spread, and that is better than cure. So what happens in the case of malaria is that this drug DDT, this chemical DDT, was developed, dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane, and it was being widely used by humans. It was being spread. It was thought of as a miracle, a chemical. It was being spread on entire cities, widely used, and by humans to actually as a pesticide to kill all mosquitoes so that there is no more malaria and things like that. And what happened was that eventually Rachel Carson in 1962, she published her book called Silent Spring, in which she highlighted all the negative impacts of DDT. And DDT was actually leading to, because of biomagnification, so when you spread DDT, it's a chemical insecticide, and it was so effective at killing pests that it became very popular. And later it was discovered that it has some serious side effects. So what happened in 1945, the US Department of Agriculture sprayed DDT on an oak forest, on an entire forest. They sprayed DDT in Pennsylvania with gypsy moths, and it killed all the gypsy moths within hours. But days later, the birds also in that area were dead, and that was because this DDT was not water soluble. It could also not be washed off of these fruits, and when the fruits are consumed by humans, they also got a lot of DDT in themselves. And eventually, the another negative impact, so first was that it led to a lot of these birds in aquatic life dying because of magnification, because birds in aquatic life were consuming these dead bugs, or even the ones that had some bit of DDT but did not die. Another thing was this DDT not being water soluble, was not being washed off from fruits and harvests, and was just getting consumed by humans. And the last thing was, it was also discovered that DDT, it stayed inside the food web, and because of biomagnification, it was leading to thinning of eggshells in these apex predators like eagles and vultures, and they were also facing a lot of population declines because of DDT. So, is prevention really better than cure? That is also something to think about, because when you're taking some actions for preventing something, it might cause some other cascades. Right. So, this was all about public health and malaria and rotavirus. Now, I have a few questions for you guys, and for the Q&A session, and this will help you get an idea of the kind of questions that might be asked to you in the exam. So, the first question is, what is the primary goal of public health? So, what is the primary goal of public health? The options are treating individual patients, improving the health of populations and preventing diseases, selling pharmaceutical drugs, or studying human anatomy. What is the primary goal of public health? We'll give you 10 seconds to think about the answer, and then I'll let you know the answer. And yes, so the answer to this question, as you might have already guessed, is improving the health of populations and preventing diseases. Our next question is, which of the following is an example of a public health measure? Vaccination programs, personal fitness training, buying health insurance, or taking vitamin supplements. Which of these is an example of a public health measure? And yeah, so the correct answer to this question is vaccination programs. So when the government carries out large scale vaccination programs throughout communities, that is an example of a public health measure. Personal fitness is an individual based measure. Buying health insurance is also individual based. We are buying health insurance, it's not being just given to us by the government, but it's not like a public health thing. And taking vitamin supplements is again an individual measure. World Health Organization is responsible for conducting surgeries worldwide, monitoring and addressing global health issues, selling medicines to developing countries, or treating individual patients. So, what is the purpose of the World Health Organization? And yeah, so the correct answer to this question is monitoring and addressing global health issues. Rotavirus primarily affects what? The respiratory system, the liver, the gastrointestinal system, or the nervous system. So, which of these systems is it that rotavirus primarily affects? And so the correct answer, as you might have already guessed, is the gastrointestinal system. We discussed the rotavirus. It actually enters into the enterocytes of the small intestine, and it leads to malabsorption, which leads to diarrhea and a lot of dehydration in children below the age of 5. And it might, in fatal cases, might lead to death. How is rotavirus mainly transmitted? Is it by airborne droplets, by contaminated food and water, mosquito bites, or by direct blood contact? So, how is it that rotavirus is getting transmitted? And so, the correct answer is via contaminated food and water. As we discussed, rotavirus is a zoonotic disease again. It's being transmitted via from animals to humans via the fecal oral route. And if you touch anything contaminated, or if you consume water or food that has been contaminated, then you'll develop rotavirus. What is the most common symptom of the rotavirus infection? Is it skin rash, severe diarrhea, headache, or muscle pain? What is the most common symptom of this disease, of this infection? Correct answer to this question is severe diarrhea, as I've already explained to you in question 4. How can rotavirus infections be prevented? By wearing a mask, by using an insect repellent, by vaccination and good hygiene practices, or by avoiding dairy products. So, which of these can actually prevent the spread of rotavirus? And so, yeah, the correct answer to this question is vaccination and good hygiene practices. Malaria is caused by a bacterium, a virus, a parasite, or a fungus. What is it that causes bacteria? And yeah, so the answer is a parasite. Malaria is actually caused by a parasite which falls in the genus Plasmodium, and Plasmodium falciparum is one of the most dangerous species of this parasite, and it's spread by a mosquito which falls in the genus Anopheles. And it's caused. Oh yeah, another thing that I forgot to mention, it's very important, is that malaria is only spread by the female Anopheles mosquito, and the males of the Anopheles mosquito do not really bite humans. They only feed on plant sap, and that is why they are not responsible for spreading the disease. It's only the females that can spread the disease. Okay, all right. Malaria is transmitted by what? Ticks, mosquitoes, contaminated food, or airborne droplets. I already gave away the answer just in the last slide. So the correct answer to this is that malaria is transmitted via mosquitoes. As I said, Anopheles mosquitoes. Which organ is most affected by malaria? Is it the lungs, or the brain, or the liver, or the red blood cells? What of these body parts is most affected by malaria? And the correct answer is red blood cells. If you have confused it with liver, that's not something that is most affected by malaria, because the liver does not get harmed, but the RBCs actually undergo rupturing and they burst because of the presence of these merocytes in their division. So that is the most affected organ. Which of these is true about the mosquito life cycle? Number one, the pupal and larvae stages of the mosquito do not fly and they reside in shallow waters. It takes 10 to 15 days after Plasmodium sporozoites have been transmitted to humans before they transform into merozoites and infect the red blood cells. Okay, so it takes 10 to 15 days after the Plasmodium sporozoites have transmitted. Okay. During the blood meal of a mosquito, is it gametocytes that are transmitted to the mosquito from an infected human, which in turn mature into male and female gametes into the mosquito gut? Or all of the above? Which of these is true about a mosquito life cycle? So yeah, the correct answer to this question is all of the above. That is true that the larvae and the pupal stages of the mosquito, they do not fly and they reside in shallow waters. That is why we should try and get rid of all the stagnant water sources or water bodies around us. Or if we cannot get rid of them, put an oil layer on it so that these mosquitoes cannot stay. And it takes 10 to 15 days, yes, for the sporozoites to which have been transmitted to transform into merozoites and then infect the red blood cells. That is why it takes even detecting that a person has been infected with malaria takes around 2 weeks before you know that the person has actually developed malaria. And during the blood meal of a mosquito, yes, it is gametocytes that get transmitted into the mosquito and they turn into mature male and female gametes in the mosquito gut. So all of these answers are correct. Moving on to the next question. What are some of the important observations that made by Sir Ronald Ross that led to the understanding of malarial transmission? So, what were some important observations? Number one, parasites reside in the brain cells of the individuals. L- uh, of the infected individuals lost all RBCs, and the presence of mosquito caused fevers in endemic areas. B. Parasites resided in liver cells of the infected individuals. Infected individuals had RBCs that contained pigmented bodies, and all mosquitoes with dappled wings occurred in areas where malaria was endemic. C. Parasites originated in the liver cells of mosquitoes and moved to the salivary glands of the infected, and mosquitoes with dappled wings would deposit the parasites in the skin of the people in area where malaria was endemic, or none of the above. So, which of these options is a correct list of the observations made by Sir Ronald Ross? And so, yeah, the correct answer to this question is that the parasites they resided in the liver cells of the infected individuals. Infected individuals had RBCs that contained pigmented bodies, and mosquitoes with dappled wings occurred in areas where malaria was endemic. Question number 13. Which of the following model organism associations with their primary areas of study is correct? Which of these following model organism and primary area of study is correct? Fruit fly to genetics and development, E. coli to sleep, zebrafish to regeneration, mice to behavioral studies, Gila cell line to cancer, and C. elegans to memory. So, which of these is an incorrect association between the primary area of study and the model organism? Yeah, so the correct answer is E. coli to sleep. Okay. Question number 14. What does the term zoonosis refer to? So, what does zoonosis refer to? Is it diseases transmitted from animals to humans? Diseases originating from contaminated water sources, caused by bacterial in agricultural settings, or diseases caused by animal bites to humans? So, what does zoonosis refer to? So, the correct answer to this is zoonosis refers to diseases being transmitted from animals to humans. Last question for today. Read the following sentences and determine the correct sequence of events in a virus life cycle. Virus releases its own genome into the host cell. Virus attaches to the host cell and enters. When the virus is released, the host cell is often lysed and destroyed. The virus exploits the host machinery to replicate itself. So, what is the correct order? 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 1, 4, and 3, 2, 3, 1, and 4, or 3, 4, 1, and 3. So, I'll give you a little longer to answer this question because, yeah. So, let's see what is the correct order in which the virus life cycle happens, in which it infects a cell. So yeah, so the correct answer to this question is option number B, 2, 1, 4, and 3. So first of all, the virus should attach to the host cell and enter it. Then it should release its own genome. Then it should exploit the host's machinery, and then only will it be released and the host cell will be lysed. Okay. So, this was all for your week 10 tutorial. Thank you for attending today's lecture. And if you have any doubts, you can type them out into the comment section of YouTube, or you can actually use the discussion forum of NPTEL to clear any of the doubts that you might have about the course and about this tutorial. And thank you for listening. I hope it was informational for you guys.